Once a thriving oasis in the heart of the California desert, the Salton Sea now lies silent and abandoned, a testament to the folly of human ambition. It was a place of promise, a man-made lake created by accident in the early 1900s, when the Colorado River breached its banks and flooded the desert floor, turning the Salton Sink into a sea. For decades, it was a popular destination for tourists and vacationers, a place where families could escape the bustle of city life and enjoy the tranquility of the desert. But as time passed, the Salton Sea began to change. The hot desert sun evaporated the saline waters to become uninhabitable. The once clear waters became oversalinated and dirty, choked with algae and dead fish. The previously pristine shores became littered with trash and debris, abandoned buildings and rusted-out cars. Now, as the sun sets, the air is thick with the acrid smell of decay. The only sound is the lapping of the sea against the shore, and the occasional cry of a lonely bird. In the fading light, a lone figure stands on the shore, gazing out over the water. It is a woman, once beautiful, but now worn and weathered by time and circumstance. She remembers the golden days of the area, when people flocked to its beaches, and the surrounding towns were bustling with locals and visitors. But those days are long gone, lost to the winds of change and the ravages of time. And so she stands there, lost in her memories, watching the sun as it lowered towards the mountains, casting a brilliant bright orange hue in the sky. Her name is Alice, and she had lived in North Shore for most of her life. Alice's parents were among the first settlers in the area, drawn by the promise of fertile land and a new way of life. As a young girl, she spent countless hours swimming, fishing, and exploring the shoreline with her friends. But as Alice grew older, she saw the nearby beaches begin to decline. The water became unsafe, and the fish began to die off. Tourists stopped coming, and the towns surrounding the sea began to wither away, becoming forgotten history. Alice tried to leave, to find a better life somewhere else, but she always ended up back in her hometown. She had inherited her parents' house there, and she couldn't bear to leave it behind. Over the years, most of her friends moved away, and the town became a shell of its former self. Alice stood on the shore, lost in thought. The once thriving body of water had long since lost its luster, and now it was just a lifeless, contaminated wasteland. She looked out at the murky water, and wondered how something that once teemed with life could now be so barren. She was tied to this desert sea, to its memories and to its history, and for so many years she was never able to escape its melancholy grasp. She had come to this spot to seek solace in the stillness of the water and the silence of the surrounding desert. But today, something was different. As Alice stood on the shoreline, a sudden gust of wind blew across the water, stirring up waves and sending a chill down her spine. She wrapped her arms around herself, trying to ward off the cold, but she knew that it wasn't just the wind that was making her shiver. Maybe it was the emptiness of the place. The sense of loss and decay seemed to hang in the air like a thick fog. Or maybe it was something else. Alice looked out over the water, the orange glow of the setting sun casting long shadows across the cracked and brittle surface of nearby wilted trees. Alice had walked this particular stretch of shoreline many times before. She knew the area well, including a group of rocks that jutted out into the water. As she approached the rocks and made her way around them, she saw a man crouch down, trying to hide something behind one of the larger boulders. He looked up and saw her. He quickly stood and tried to act casual, then seemed to be studying her intently, and she couldn't help but feel uncomfortable.
"Hello there."
He smiled and greeted her warmly, as if he had been expecting her. Alice was a little taken aback by the man's friendly demeanor, but she smiled and greeted him in return. As Alice continued walking across the rocks to pass him, she could see that he was only slightly older than her, with deep lines etched into his face from years of exposure to the harsh sun. There was something unsettling about him, but she couldn't quite put her finger on it.
"It's a beautiful sunset, isn't it?"
"Yes, it is," Alice said, still feeling uneasy about the unexpected encounter and continuing on her way, scrambling over the rocks.
"I used to come here all the time when I was younger. I'm here to say goodbye to the Salton Sea."
Alice didn't really feel like talking to this stranger, but something about this man piqued her curiosity, and she felt a strange sense of familiarity with him. "Why are you saying goodbye to it?" Alice asked, intrigued. He sighed.
My parents came here looking for a better life, but they never found it. My dad died when I was young, and my mom worked herself to the bone trying to support me. I spent a lot of time out here on the shore, dreaming of a better life for myself. But things didn't turn out that way.
He continued. Alice listened intently, feeling a sense of sadness for his difficult upbringing, and wondered if maybe she knew him from a long time ago since he was from the area.
I got into some trouble when I was a teenager, and it ruined any chance I had of making something of myself. Now, I come out here every year to say goodbye to the life I never had.
Alice could feel the weight of his words hanging in the air between them. She wanted to respond with something comforting, but no appropriate words came to mind. "I'm sorry," she finally managed to say. He smiled sadly.
It's not your fault. Just life, I guess.
They looked at each other in silence for a short while, and then the man's phone rang.
You'll have to excuse me.
He was holding up his hand, palm facing her. He answered the phone and started speaking in hushed tones. Alice got the sense something was wrong. She waved her goodbye to the man and continued on her way, relieved the exchange had ended quickly. As she continued walking away, though, she felt a strange sense of connection to the man. She continued on her way, and when she looked back, he was no longer there. As the man strolled back to his car, he couldn't help but think to himself,
Today's not the day. Not with her.
He had been on the verge of spinning yet another tall tale. But something about her had stopped him in his tracks. She seemed too genuine, too sincere, and he just wasn't in the mood to play games. He didn't have to take the call. He could have continued ignoring the caller as he had been doing for weeks, but figured it was a good way to end the interaction with the random stranger and to finally start facing his own reality. Jack knew he had a reputation for getting into people's heads, for weaving elaborate stories that left them bewildered and unsure. It was a rush, seeing the look of surprise and wonder on their faces, but he was getting tired of it. The part he told to the woman about him always getting into trouble and struggling to make something of himself was true, but the rest was all made up. He fished a cigarette out of his pocket, lighting it with a flick of his lighter. He thought to himself that he was ready for something different, something real. He didn't want to keep living a life built on deception and manipulation. It was time for a change. Maybe it was time to start being honest for once. Maybe it was time to see what could happen if he didn't rely on his silver tongue and quick wit. He got in his car and drove off. He had a deal to do. He also had to find another hiding place. He was running out of time. Walking back to her neighborhood, Alice was still thinking of where she could know that man at the beach from. She walked through the semi-abandoned streets, past the shuttered storefronts and empty lots, until she came to her parents' old house. It was a dilapidated home that held many childhood memories, and she didn't have the energy or the interest in upkeeping it. The place was overgrown with weeds, one of the windows was boarded up, and the front porch sagged under her feet. But despite the decay, for so many years Alice couldn't shake the feeling that she was meant to be here. She pushed open the front door, the wood creaking under her feet. Even though she had lived here many years, she still felt a sense of nostalgia as she made her way through the empty rooms. She walked past dusty picture frames and towards the cracked linoleum-lined kitchen. As she turned a corner, she felt a jolt of recognition run through her. She remembered that man on the beach from her dreams. For years, Alice had dreamt of this man, his face always just out of reach. She'd wake up feeling a sense of longing, as though she was missing something essential. And there he was, standing before her in the flesh just minutes ago. She knew this man. She knew what she had to do. She looked up at the fading light of the sun, and for the first time in a long while, she felt a sense of hope. Leaving her home would be difficult, but she also knew that it was time to let go. And as the sun dipped below the horizon and the Salton Sea slipped further into darkness, Alice closed the door and took her first step into a new future.